This is just a quick focus on one aspect at the very end of Lord of the Flies and a way to think about incorporating this new piece of terminology into your essays. So I'm going to be talking about using the concept of the deus ex machina at the very end of Lord of the Flies. So deus ex machina means God from the machine. It's a literal translation. If you think back to the work you've done in drama on Greek tragedy, and you remember you would have the gods literally on stage, high above, and they would then pluck your hero or your protagonist out of a tricky situation and save them. Obviously, that is the literal translation and the origins of it, but now it's tended to be used as a piece of terminology to describe a sudden moment where an insolvable problem is abruptly resolved by some new event, the intervention of a character, or an object that we weren't expecting. What I want us to do is think about how this concept fits with the realism of Lord of the Flies. Does the appearance of the naval officer at the very end to intervene and save Ralph appear unrealistic or magical in a way that the rest of the novel perhaps didn't? And if Golding has done that, why might he have done it? If we're thinking about Golding's message in the novel, that is something that we're going to want to portray in our essays. To reach your highest bands on the mark scheme, you've got to show that you've got a good understanding that you're not writing about the characters as though they're people, you're writing about them as though they are a creation of William Golding to convey a message or make a point. So what I want you to think about is how this appearance of the deus ex machina, the naval officer at the end of the novel, fits with the message that Golding is trying to portray in the rest of the novel. And if you frame the device of the deus ex machina within that sort of idea, then you're more likely to hit those highest bands on the mark scheme. Think about Golding and his use here of irony. Piggy often says in the novel, what's grown-ups going to think? But actually, Golding there seems to be positioning grown-ups in Piggy's mind as an idealised form of behaviour, whereas actually the grown-ups are just as uncivilised as the boys turn out to be. They are the ones who fight the war. If they hadn't been engaged in war, the boys would never have ended up in the island in the first place. So Piggy, and therefore Golding through Piggy, is giving the boys this idealised picture of what grown-ups are actually like. And we have to remember that the naval officer himself is a grown-up, but actually he's a grown-up involved in warfare. Is his war any more civilised than the war that Jack's tribe wages upon Ralph? When you're writing about it, it's a great opportunity to think about assessment objective 3. Obviously, AO2 is going to be covered if you're talking about the terminology of deus ex machina, but also you're going to want to think about how you can link this idea to Golding's beliefs and his background to have some all-important context in your essay. So what we're going to do now is just have a quick think about how we would write about this device. If you were given an essay question, for instance, how does Golding show the boys' descent into savagery? You're going to want to think about using the deus ex machina, but also using it in a way that you can cover all your assessment objectives. And remember, our format for each paragraph is we would start with a topic sentence which would answer the question. We're going to embed a quotation that supports this idea. We're going to identify any terminology that's being used, then move on, very importantly, to the analysis and the evaluation of how it is being used, throw in a little bit of context, and then provide a link back to the question just to make sure that the whole paragraph is sort of perfectly formed and focused on what the question is asking you. The next slides I'm going to quickly talk through using the deus ex machina within this question and using this format. So I would recommend, if you're trying to improve your work, is actually try and write the paragraph yourself and see how you go before you move on to the next slide, or you might want to look at the example I'm giving and then think about how you could adapt that for another aspect of the novel, maybe a motif or a symbol. So, the question, how does Golding show the boys' descent into savagery? Here's the topic sentence. At the novel's climax, Golding uses the appearance and intervention of the naval officer to emphasise how far the boys have descended into savagery. I have put the edition of Lord of the Flies that I'm using on the very first slide. So when the page references for my quotations appear, it refers to this edition. You're then going to add in your quotation, which is page 222 of my copy. So the boys have descended into savagery with his initial reaction to what he finds being wary astonishment and his appearance of a white top cap and white drill contrasting with the filthy look of the boys. As you can see, the quotations have been embedded into the sentence. Although it's not necessary to do this, if you're aiming for those much higher grades, the 7s, the 8s, the 9s, you want to show a sophistication in your writing, a flow, a kind of easiness of how to use quotations, and embedding your quotations really helps you do that. So from the quotation, we're going to move on to using terminology. And here we're going to introduce that term of the deus ex machina. So the use by Golding of this deus ex machina reveals an irony at the heart of the novel. With Ralph's longing to be rescued by adults and Piggy's plaintive refrain of what's grown-ups going to think, the boys see the adult world as the antithesis of savagery, yet the pristine appearance of the naval officer, typo there, seemingly pure in his symbolic white attire, reinforces that the entire situation has only arisen because of the combative nature of mankind. Golding shows that the naval ship has stumbled on the boys by accident during their wartime activities, suggesting a savagery and lack of compassion within them. They may seem to have been the solution to Ralph's danger, but in fact, without the war caused by adults, he wouldn't have been on the island in the first place. And from here, we would move on to add in a little bit of context. And then from there, we link back to the question to round off this paragraph response. Bearing in mind Golding's traumatic wartime experiences and his knowledge of human nature in boys from his time as a school teacher, the author seems to show the descent of the boys into savagery as an inevitability due to the example they have been set, along with the inherent evil of mankind. When you're writing an essay, you would be looking to write paragraphs in this much detail approximately 3 to 4 times with a quick introduction. I hope this gives you a little bit more insight into the deus ex machina at the end of the novel, and also a little bit of a guide of how to use this terminology in an essay. Thank you.